Hey everyone, welcome to Hammerhead Hobbies. In this episode, I'm going to be gluing this fuselage together and removing the raised seam line. Alright, welcome back. We're going to begin with dry fitting the fuselage together just to see how it fits, and then seeing what raised seam marks we can get rid of. After dry fitting, I'll sand each half of the fuselage to remove any protruding plastic that may impede the fit of the pieces. I'll be using a sanding stick and carefully work around the raised positioning pips. Many modelers skip the dry fit and sanding portion, and that's why they might find gaps in the seams, which could lead to unwanted filling and sanding. Now that the pieces have been sanded, I can start gluing. I'm using a thin plastic glue which has a capillary effect and sucks into the seam. I start from one end of the model and work my way around. I brush on the glue and apply gentle pressure, letting the glue bond the plastic. These thin glues tend to dry faster, and only a few seconds of pressure is necessary. I work my way around the model, making sure the parts align. You can also use tape or clamps to hold the parts together, and I tend to use those more for warped parts that need more pressure to stay in position. I just happen to need a clamp on this part of the fuselage, and what I have here is a plastic clothes peg from the dollar store, which works perfect. Now I can continue gluing the rest of the seam. Okay, now again, we're just aligning the pieces, making sure they're as flush as possible. We don't want to have any raised portions that need extra sanding or filling. Now that the pieces are glued together, you can see that there is a definite raised seam mark. We're going to go ahead and try and sand that down and get rid of it. Alright, now that we've given it a little bit of time to dry, as you can see here, there's a couple of spots there and there where those are the pieces that were left off the sprue. It wasn't cut off very properly, so we can go ahead and cut those off. And I don't have to go very close. And just like that, and as you can see, it's cut them off nicely. So then I go ahead and grab my hobby knife, and I can very carefully just scratch the edge of it, being careful not to remove any panel lines. So over here you'll see a whole bunch of panel lines. These are all raised. If I were to scratch these off, I would have to probably engrave new ones, but they wouldn't be the same as the raised ones. It'd have to be etched ones, and it would look different. So what I do is I'll start at the panel line, raised panel line, and I'll slowly go this way, making sure that I'm careful not to remove any panel lines. And all I want to do is just lightly score top edge, just like that, and you can see I'm only taking off the raised portion of the plastic. And we'll do again the same at the top. Being very careful, and you can see it's just taking off a very, very tiny portion of the very top of this panel line. Now that we've finished with the knife, I can take a sanding stick and begin sanding the top very slowly. Now this is 400 grit. Okay, now depending on the size, how raised it is, you can either use 400 or you can even use 320. I wouldn't go much coarser than 320. Some people use 220 depending on the project, but it does leave deep gouges which you would have to try and remove later. Okay, So again, you can use a sanding stick, or what you can do, which I've done a lot of times, is just grab a piece of sandpaper. Now this is 400 grit again. Fold it a couple of times just to make it thinner. And it does act just like a sanding stick, except at a fraction of the cost. And you can make it as detailed as you like. You can make that even thinner. Now the bottom here is relatively flat, so you might have to do this for a little bit. And again, try to not erase the panel lines, just in between the two panel lines. Okay, so this does take time and patience. And again, just keep going and keep going until you're satisfied. So it is working out really nicely. And we have taken a lot of that raised line out of there. Move on to the 600 grit. Again, I'll fold it the way I like. The 600 will not only sand it down a little more, but hopefully remove some of those grooves. Okay, so I'll just do this back portion, but it does take a little bit of time and effort just to get it right. But it does make a huge difference when you've painted the model. You don't see that raised portion, and it does look, a lot more realistic. You can feel the bump here. Here it's relatively smooth, even though you can still see the line. It's a smooth transition, but it did do a great job, and you can barely feel anything. Again, don't be scared to really dig in there. And again, the main thing you're trying to avoid is removing those panel lines. Okay, I'm back from giving it a quick primer, and as you can see, the C mark is virtually gone from the bottom, and you can see how it gradually becomes more and more visible as the less sanding I did. And over here I didn't do any sanding, and it's very visible there. Same with the top. Okay, I sanded most of this, and as you can see, even with 1000 grit on the bottom here, you can't see any scuff marks. And again, this is just a quick primer. And I didn't do any filling or anything like that. I just wanted to show you how to get rid of a C mark. And you can see the big difference between that and that C mark there. And that's how I glue a fuselage together and get rid of the C mark.